And one of the people Trump keeps calling out as his enemy happens to be my first guest tonight, Congressman Adam Schiff.
Well, I always say, so we have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries. But the thing that's tougher to handle are these lunatics that we have inside, like Adam Schiff, Adam Shifty Schiff. Think of this guy's going to be a senator. It is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. They're Marxists and communists and fascists, and they're sick. I use a guy like Adam Schiff because they made up the Russia hoax. Adam Shifty Schiff, he's a crooked guy. He's a crooked politician, 100%. And he's going to be a senator now. Can you believe it?
But again, he's a political opponent of yours.
He's not
an enemy.
No, he's a. Well, of course, he's an enemy. He's an enemy. We have a bigger problem from within, and they hate it. I noticed today they were saying, he said the enemy from within. Of course, it's Adam Schiff. These are bad people. These are sick people and bad people.
Well, we do know that Congressman Schiff is definitely living rent-free in Trump's head, but that language is also alarming. And because it's so common these days from Trump, it's easy to get numb to it. And it's easy to convince yourself that it has nothing to do with you. It's easy to think his threats are only directed at his political opponents and public figures, you know, people like Adam Schiff or Nancy Pelosi. But they're not. I mean, sure, Trump is calling those people out by name right now, so there's a significance to that. But when he talks about the enemy within, he's not just talking about a handful of his political opponents. He's really talking about a broad swath of people. He's talking about any woman who wants to have an abortion or the doctors who might provide it. He's talking about immigrants vowing to launch the largest domestic deportation operation in American history, and even legal immigrants who Trump would denaturalize and deport to countries they barely know. He's talking about members of the LGBTQ plus community, like transgender Americans, running on rolling back their rights. He's talking about people who used to work for him, who dared to disagree with him, some of whom he has insinuated at times deserve execution. He's talking about journalists and elected officials and federal workers and schools and peaceful protesters and any rank-and-file voter who he deems a threat to his political ambitions. I mean, he's talking about so many Americans, and he may very well be talking about you. So I know when you hear these sound bites of Trump calling high-profile Democrats his enemy, it might be easy to tune it out or think it won't really impact you, to think, that has nothing to do with me. But it's important to hear them within the full context of who he is and what he has said before. Because there's a very real possibility that it does impact you, or your sister, or your son, or your neighbor. And as unbelievable as it might sound, it's important to realize why Trump is saying this over and over again. He's saying it because he is trying to condition the American people ahead of his possible second term to think about his enemies as people who are bad, who are less than, who deserve to have their rights threatened. If you say something enough, people will eventually believe it, right? And if people believe it, then whatever happens to them, whatever he might do to punish them, will be okay. The Atlantic's Ann Applebaum put it like this, quote, "If you connect your opponents with disease, illness, and poisoned blood, if you dehumanize them as insects or animals, if you speak of squashing them or cleansing them as if they were pests or bacteria, then you can much more easily arrest them, deprive them of rights, exclude them, or even kill them. If they are parasites, they aren't human. If they are vermin, they don't get to enjoy freedom of speech or freedoms of any kind. And if you squash them, you won't be held accountable." That is what Trump is doing. That is his goal. And if you don't believe it, just listen to this from his running mate, J.D. Vance.
He's asked about these enemies within comments. And I've read all of it. I've listened to all of it. It's hard for me to know what he really means about it. But that's not my question. My question is, why is it necessary?
Well, Bill, first of all, Donald Trump is unfiltered. I think this is one of the reasons why the campaign has gone well, is because he's not doing a basement campaign strategy. He's not just running on slogans. When people ask him questions, he speaks from the heart.
He's just speaking from the heart, just speaking from the heart over and over again. So I guess, once again, as we often say, let's take him at his word. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff. He's now a candidate for U.S. Senate. Congressman, it's great to see you. And I just wanted to start by asking you about today. As I just started saying, I think it's important to take a step back and realize the significance of the vice president, a Democratic nominee, sitting on the stage with Liz Cheney. You know them both well. What were you thinking when you were watching today?
Well, just how remarkable a spectacle it is to see the two of them together, and not just Liz Cheney, but Dick Cheney as well, supporting a Democrat for president, Kamala Harris for president. But I'm not surprised that Liz Cheney is stepping up this way. She has demonstrated over the last several years that she has real spine, she has real character, that she's willing to live her principles, her oath of office. And what has been so tragic about the last several years is just how rare the Liz Cheneys and Adam Kinzingers turned out to be. I would have thought many more in the Republican Party would have stood up, spoken out. Many are starting to now, and I think Liz has really been leading the way.
To that point, Congressman, it's such a good point because she has not avoided threats. She's not avoided criticism. She lost her political seat because of this. At the same time, while she is dealing with all of that, you've been called out by Trump so many times. You're still out there publicly talking. And so my question to you is, why can't people like John Kelly, Jim Mattis, Mitt Romney, and others speak out? Is it fear? Is it something else? And are you disappointed?
I am disappointed that more are not speaking out. There's, all of Bush world, really. George W. Bush and the, hundreds of people that were close to him and his administration that still could speak powerfully to the Republican Party and Republican base. They've chosen to remain silent. They don't want to get sullied by Donald Trump. They don't want to, take all of the kind of incoming sleaze from the Trump enablers. And while I can certainly understand that, our democracy is on the edge here. We have a candidate for president who's talking about unleashing the military against his domestic opponents. This is not the time to be squeamish. People need to stand up and be counted. And I hope more will follow the example of Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney.
Yeah, no question about it. And there's some people who could do that. I mean, I just played several clips, I don't know if you saw, of Trump going after you by name. I know you've said you live rent-free in his head. I think that's fair. But are you ever afraid for yourself or your family? And how do you factor that in?
Well, I think you have to be concerned when you have someone running for president who is singling you out as an enemy to be dealt with by the military, because that kind of crazy talk reaches people who are unwell. But look, I think the candidate himself is unwell. He seems increasingly unhinged, detached from reality in his conduct of his campaign, in his obscene references during his campaign, in his dancing instead of giving interviews on the campaign stage. So we're seeing a lot of very erratic behavior, which would be okay if it was your crazy grandpa, your crazy old grandpa. But this is a candidate for president. But more than that, to have an American candidate for president nominee using the language of a Kremlin dictator or a South American dictator or any other dictator is unheard of in American politics and poses a real threat to the health of our democracy.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you one of the specifics you already referenced. I mean, he's talked about using the military against the enemy from within, which in my view is quite a broad swath of people. He obviously wouldn't have that power to do unless he's elected. But I wonder what you think about that possibility. And, you could likely be a new member of the Senate. How are you and others preparing for that possibility?
Well, I'm preparing for a Harris presidency, which I think is the most likely outcome, but is, of course, very close. And, should the worst happen and he once again have access to the levers of power, we're all going to have to do everything we can to defend our democracy and our institutions, because during the 4 years he had in office, he drummed out all the people of any independence or stature who might stand up to him and replaced them with utter sycophants. And he would start with the utter sycophants. But I think the point you made at the top is such an important one, Jen, that he may be singling out particular people or groups right now. He's moved on for the moment from smearing the Haitian community to going after me or Nancy Pelosi or others. But tomorrow there's no telling who it will be, what group it will be, whether he will encourage his enablers in state government or local government to turn after their local political opponents or people who are expressing themselves in criticism of their government or his policies. So this is I think, a danger to the whole country. And just what Harris has been pointing out, we need a president who will bring us together, not one who wants to cast anyone who disagrees with him as an enemy within.
No question. And just so everybody, we're obviously watching the start of the event. We're going to bring that to everyone. We're going to listen to that in just a moment. But I wanted to ask, because I think everybody's tuning into this. We're just 15 days out from the election. Hopefully they're tuning in to kind of the Trump possibilities here, which is one of the reasons I love talking to you about it. One of the things you've talked about is the fact that now the so-called guardrails Trump may have had during his first term won't be there. And I just wanted to play specifically with Congress is one of the things I think there isn't enough focus on. I wanted to play this exchange with House Speaker Mike Johnson when he was pressed yesterday about Trump rhetoric and then defended it.
I mean, I've had colleagues in the House say he must be eliminated. He must be extinguished.
He's literally talking about
this stuff is over the top.
You know, against Democrats. I mean, he's literally talking.
No, he's not. No,
yes, he is.
No, he's not, Jake. No, he's not. No, he's talking about using the National Guard and the military to keep the peace in our streets.
And I wanted to raise this because Trump needs enablers, right? He needs enablers within the White House, but also in Congress in order to do what he wants to do. And the January 6th committee and all of your work raised this issue extensively. So what should people understand from listening to that about, I guess, how far his party will let him go?
Well, I think what people should understand, for Mike Johnson, who wants to remain Speaker, who feels that he needs Trump's support to remain Speaker, he will do anything, say anything. He will defend the indefensible. He will tell you what Donald Trump is saying is not what he is saying. He'll sacrifice everything. Robert Carroll, the historian, once said that power doesn't corrupt as much as it reveals. Well, it's revealing Mike Johnson to be who he is, someone desperate to be in power. It revealed Liz Cheney to be a person of great courage and conviction. But it revealed so many J.D. Vances, the people who once described Trump as a potential Hitler, a cultural opioid, as being utterly craven, now desperate to be on this unfit ticket.